All right, good morning, everyone. As you know, we like to begin on time. I am Lindsay Lombardi with Beyond the Boardroom. My partner, Diane Michael, with Beyond the Boardroom and Callan Group, will be joining us shortly. If this is your first time with us, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you. I know for a few of you, it'll take you a minute to pop up in here. So we're going to do our intro slow so you can make sure you guys all get in before the course starts. Our goal at Beyond the Boardroom is to educate board members and CAMs in an easy way at your desk, on your mobile, while you're traveling. The more you learn, the more you earn, as Warren Buffett would say. We know how important CAM education is and the CE credits are, and that's exactly why we've decided to launch Beyond the Boardroom program. We started on the fourth Wednesday of each month and have already grown to offer education and CE credits on the second and fourth Wednesday. So please mark your calendars. Our next webinar Wednesday will be happening on June 24th. Today we have for you George to start off the day with a CE of the HOA credit, which is under the EH2 category. And then we have a credit for IFM and ELE. And I will add the agenda in a few minutes after we show George where you are coming from today. So if you are a board member or a CAM, please put that in the chat as well as your location. If you have any questions during the presentation or today at all, please utilize the Q&A tab at the bottom and put it in there because we turn the chat on and off during because it gets a little crazy when everyone's asking questions in there. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section. We send weekly updates on all of our education programs, and so please make sure that you keep an eye out on the email and save us as safe senders so you don't miss any important educational updates. And please let your fellow board members and CAMs know about our program so that they can also join to get free credits and meet our wonderful association allies. To obtain credit, we'll go over that at the end. So please make sure that you stay tuned. You will have to register separately and submit something for each course, and we do give code words at the end. If you do not have that, you will not get credit. So please, please, please make sure that you do stay tuned for the entire course. This is the way that we can tell the DBPR we made sure that you guys attended the whole course and didn't just log in and tune out and then, come back at the end. So please, again, make sure that you're staying on so that you get all that important information that we provide throughout the presentation and at the end so that you can provide the proper information in order to get credit. All right, so without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Terra-Scape's owner. This is George Kennedy, as a lot of you who have tuned in before know. He is a seasoned landscape professional with over 20 years of experience in the green industry. He brings a unique blend of technical expertise and business acumen to every project, backed by a bachelor's degree in business and a comprehensive portfolio of state and industry certificates. Excuse me. Throughout his career, George has specialized in sustainable landscape solutions, irrigation efficiency, pest management, and outdoor lighting systems. He is widely recognized for his commitment to environmental stewardship, client satisfaction, and industry best practices. George holds the following credentials: Florida Certified Horticultural Professional Certificate, Certified Florida Green Industry Best Management Practices, Commercial Landscape Maintenance Pesticide License, Certified Pest Control Operator. He is a Florida Water Star accredited landscape professional and irrigation professional. He is an NDS professional drainage contractor, CAS certified landscape lighting installer, and AMP certified landscape lighting installer. George continues to be a driving force in advancing professional standards across Florida's residential communities, commercial properties, and environmental restoration projects. So welcome, George, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I need somebody to give me permission to share my screen.
Oh, well, that would be helpful. Did you request?
Mm-hmm.
Can you do it again, please? Let me see. Sorry, everyone. There's always a technical issue. Um, it's not coming. Can you share now?
There it goes.
Okay. And then
Okay.
George, do you want me to leave the chat on for you to ask questions?
I don't need it.
Okay. All
Thank you,
right.
though. Good morning, everybody. My name is George Kennedy, as Lindsay said. Thank you for being here. Today, we're going to talk about landscape leadership, what national best practices teach us about transparent operations. This session is really about one central idea. When landscape operations are more transparent, communities make better decisions, vendors perform better, and budgeting becomes much more predictable. This is not a session about making landscape more complicated. It's about making it easier to understand, easier to manage, and easier to align with the expectations of boards, residents, and property managers. So let me go over what we'll start with today. First, we will talk about why this topic matters so much to CAMs and association leaders. We will look at a common problem in our industry, that is the disconnect between boards and vendors. And from there, we will discuss what open book budgeting actually means, what transparent vendors tend to share, and how that level of visibility helps reduce surprises, disputes, and change orders. We will also look at how CAMs can apply these ideas in RFPs, vendor conversations, annual budgeting, and long-term planning. And then finally, we will wrap up with a quick question and answer session and followed by a short quiz that we will do together. Before I move on, I would like to encourage you to think about this question. How many of your landscape frustrations are really service issues, and how many are actually communication and expectation issues? Why this topic matters to CAMs. One reason this matters is simple. Landscaping is not a small line item in your budget. In many communities, it represents between 10 and 25% of the annual operating budget. That means even modest inefficiencies or misunderstandings can have a noticeable impact. Oops, sorry about that. When CAMs talk about landscape pain points, the same issues come up over and over. Budget overruns, unexpected change orders, scope disputes, and vendor mistrust. These issues create more work for the manager, more tension for the board, and more frustration for the residents. So this topic isn't just about vendor selection, it's about operational stability. One of the biggest challenges in landscape operations is what I call the trust gap. Boards often distrust vendors because they don't always understand pricing, staffing, or why extra work is being recommended. Vendors often distrust boards because they feel second-guessed, underinformed, or pushed to deliver more than the contract actually includes. So both sides become defensive. And that's what happens. And when that happens, management becomes reactive instead of strategic. Instead of planning, everyone is responding. Instead of solving root problems, everyone is managing friction. This is one of the main reasons that transparency matters. Transparency helps reduce that emotional tension. One of the most important observations from national best practice operations is this. Companies using open book financials tend to have a significantly lower forecasting error rates than closed book service members. The figure in the presentation is 34 to 40% lower error rates in project budget forecasting. Now, whether that exact percentage varies by market or service type, the principle is what matters. The more visible the assumptions are, the more predictable the outcomes tend to be. That makes sense. If labor assumptions are hidden, if material pricing isn't discussed, and if scope isn't clearly tied to cost, then the budget can look fine at the beginning and still fail later. Transparency does not guarantee perfection, but it does improve accuracy. So what do we mean by open book budgeting? It means that the client isn't just given a final number. They're given visibility into the thinking behind that number. That usually includes labor assumptions, material pricing, overhead and margin structure, and a clear connection between scope and cost. In other words, the price becomes explainable. This does not mean the vendor has to reveal every internal detail of the business. It means they are transparent enough that the CAM or board can understand the major cost drivers. That understanding is what leads to better decisions. Closed book versus open book vendors. This slide compares two very different approaches. A closed book vendor tends to present lump sum pricing, respond to problems after they appear, and leave the client with limited insight into how that number was built. An open book vendor tends to offer more line item clarity, include planned contingencies, operate more collaboratively, and create better budget forecasts. Now, this doesn't mean that every closed book vendor is bad or every open book vendor is great, but what it does mean is that one model encourages explanation and planning while the other often creates uncertainty. And uncertainty usually shows up later as tension, delay, or unexpected cost. If a vendor is truly operating transparently, there are certain indicators they should be prepared to discuss. For example, labor hours by service type, material escalation assumptions, equipment allocation when applicable, contingency allowances, and annual cost drivers. And why does this matter? Because when a CAM understands what is driving the number, it becomes much easier to explain to a board, compare proposals intelligently, and anticipate where pressure points may show up during the year. This is especially valuable during renewal season, budget season, and enhancement planning. How does transparency reduce scope creep? Many service disputes start with a simple sentence. That wasn't included. When the scope is vague and the pricing assumptions are hidden, that phrase shows up all the time. Transparent operations reduce those moments because exclusions are clearer, triggers are clearer, and contingency planning is clearer. That means fewer emergency approvals, fewer deferred maintenance surprises, and fewer arguments over whether someone or something should have been included. This is one of the most practical benefits of transparency. Less confusion, less scrambling, and fewer avoidable conflicts. This slide contrasts a traditional model with a best practice model. The traditional model is usually price first selection, minimal explanation, and annual renegotiation. The best practice model is more focused on discussing drivers up front, planning across multiple years, and using shared performance metrics. And that shift is important. When price becomes the only decision factor, the conversation becomes very narrow. But when cost drivers, outcomes, and measurement are also discussed, the relationship becomes more strategic. That's where better vendor partnerships start. Here are some shared performance metrics that matter. Transparent vendors usually track more than whether the crew just showed up. They track metrics such as labor efficiency, rework frequency, budget variance, weather impact assumptions, and service response times. And why are these useful? Because they move the conversation away from vague impressions and toward measurable performance. Instead of saying, it feels like the service has slipped, you can ask, has your rework increased? Has response time changed? Has labor efficiency dropped? Is weather affecting the service schedule in a measurable way? Metrics create clarity. Clarity supports better management. So how can you apply this to RFPs? A great place to start is the RFP process. This slide highlights a few strong improvements. Ask for cost assumptions. Require scope exclusions. Request an escalation methodology. and require change order triggers. These 4 items alone can dramatically improve proposal quality. They force vendors to explain how they think, not just what they charge, and that helps you compare proposals on something deeper than price alone. When operations are more transparent, budgeting gets stronger. Open book practices improve annual budgeting accuracy, multi-year forecasting, confidence, and reserve contribution decisions. For CAMs, that matters a lot because one of the hardest parts of the job is not just managing current service, it's helping the board prepare intelligently for what comes next. The more predictable the landscape budget is, the easier it becomes to plan projects, schedule improvements, and avoid last-minute financial stress. Here are some of the best questions that CAMs can start asking right away. How do you build your pricing? What assumptions are most likely to change? How do you track labor efficiency? What causes budget overruns in your market? These are strong questions that go beneath the surface. They tell you whether a vendor is thoughtful, prepared, and capable of a real partnership. They also change the tone of the relationship. You are no longer just reviewing a price sheet, you are leading a business conversation. So let's make this practical with a real-world type of an example, an HOA entrance rehabilitation project. This is exactly the kind of work where transparency matters. Why? Because entrance work often involves multiple moving parts. It could include plant replacement, irrigation changes, annual color, grading, landscape lighting considerations, and sometimes hardscape or signage coordination. If the scope is vague and the budget is lump sum only, this kind of project can create a lot of confusion. Imagine 2 vendors proposing the same entrance rehabilitation. One says, we can do it for this total price. The other says, here's the labor assumption, here's the plant material assumption, here's the irrigation allowance. Here is what is excluded, and here is what would trigger a change order. Even if the second proposal is not cheapest at first glance, it is often the safer proposal to manage. Why? Because it gives the association a clearer roadmap, it reduces ambiguity, and it gives the manager something concrete to explain to the board. Now let's take it one step further. If a board later asks, why did the project cost change? An open book approach gives a better answer. You can say, well, material pricing moved, or existing irrigation conditions were different from what we assumed, or the approved scope expanded. That's very different from saying the vendor sent a change order. Transparent operations improve accountability on both sides. The vendor has to explain changes, and the client has a clearer basis for approving or challenging them. So here are the big takeaways. First, transparency reduces friction. Second, predictability matters more than price. Third, CAMs play a real leadership role by setting expectations early. And fourth, best practices lead to better outcomes for boards, residents, and vendors alike. I especially want to emphasize the phrase at the bottom that this is about leadership, not micromanagement. Transparency is about controlling every detail. It is about creating a healthier operating environment. As we wrap up the teaching section, the final thought is this. The goal is not to make every board a landscape expert. The goal is to help communities work with landscape partners in a way that is more informed, more stable, and more predictable. When expectations are clear and cost drivers are visible, decisions improve. That gives CAMs a stronger position, that gives boards more confidence, and it gives vendors a better chance to perform successfully. At this point, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. I don't see anything. Oh, hang on. Okay, let's do the
Quiz.
quiz and then we'll go to the questions. If you guys have any questions or if there's anything that comes up while we're going through this Q&A or the quiz, pop them in the question and answer section and we will address them after.
Okay. So we're going to do a quick 10 question review. I'll read each question, give you a moment to think about it, and then we'll go through the correct answer together.
And I'm gonna open the chat so you guys can type it in there.
Okay, question number 1. Landscaping services typically represent approximately what percentage of an association's annual operating budget? Just giving everybody a minute here to answer the question. So the number 1, the correct answer is C. That is 10 to 25%. Number 2, one common challenge between community boards and vendors is often described as what? And the correct answer is B, the trust gap. Question number 3. Open book budgeting primarily focuses on which principle? Very good. The answer is B, providing visibility into cost assumptions. Number 4, which of the following items is typically disclosed in an open book budgeting model? Okay, very good. The answer is D, all of the above. Number 5, according to national best practice observations, companies using open book financial practices tend to achieve what benefit? Okay, and the answer is B, lower forecasting error rates. Good job, everybody. Number 6, transparency in vendor operations can help reduce which common problem in landscape contracts? Okay, and the correct answer is B, scope creep and service disputes. Number 7, which of the following is an example of a performance metric that transparent vendors may track? Okay, and the correct answer is D, all of the above. Number 8, a traditional vendor selection model often prioritizes which factor above all others? Very good. And the correct answer is C, lowest price. Number 9, one improvement CAMs can make when preparing RFPs is to request what from vendors? Very good. The correct answer is B, cost assumptions and escalation methodology. And finally, number 10, what is one major benefit of transparent financial practices for associations? Okay, and the correct answer is B, more accurate budgeting and forecasting. Good job, everyone. Thank you all for being here with me this morning. I hope that you took something valuable away from the presentation. If there's any questions that I can answer for you, my contact information is listed here on the final page. And if anybody has any questions before I go, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, so I do have a few questions. Let's see. How are you seeing material prices being affected after the freeze that we had?
Plant prices have not gone up significantly, about 5% on average. The South Florida nurseries, which is where most of the nursery stock comes from for all of Florida, was not hit nearly as hard as we were hit in this area.
Good to know. And can you expect labor costs to be higher in the summer for extra work outside of your contract, due to the heat and the amount of hours staff can safely work?
So if it's part of the annual contract, we factor that in. So we know that in December, January, February, we don't need as many labor hours. So when we come up with a total budgeting hour for the year, we're factoring in all of the visits times the hours per visit. And so we factor that in on um, the ones that are part of the contract. Now, if it's like a project like an enhancement or something that's outside the scope of work, um, what we typically do is we budget for the extra hours because we know it's going to take longer in the summertime.
Gotcha.
So hopefully that answers the question.
And then what steps should properties be taking now? I mean, this is off topic of what you were talking about today, but what steps should properties be taking now to prepare for any hurricanes that we might get now that we're in hurricane season?
You want to make sure that any tree work that needs to be done is completed. That's the main thing. You know, beyond that, there's not a lot that can really be done from a landscape perspective other than making sure that your trees are taken care of. Trees and palms.
Someone asked, our vendors keep saying that it's not included in our contract, but there is nothing in our contract stating that. Michael, can you elaborate on that a little bit? I don't know what specifically you're talking about on that one. Someone else asked, can we have a copy of the presentation? If you reach out to George, he would be able to send that to you. I'm going to put his information in the chat here in a moment. And then someone else, is it better to have irrigation and landscaping bids together? Or is there a benefit to splitting them up?
So our approach has always been to keep them together, and the reason for that is that if they're separate, then what typically happens is the landscape vendor will point to the irrigation person and say, it's their problem, and the irrigation person will point to the landscape person and say it's their problem. And then without having one point of contact or one person to rely on to make sure that the problem gets solved, it can de-escalate into a finger pointing match where it doesn't really benefit anyone.
Yeah, and I can second that. I've had that happen to me at properties um, multiple times. So I always say if you can keep your um, exterior landscape, pest control, irrigation, and actual like maintenance contract together is the best thing because the pest control person will say, well, the irrigation isn't going enough. And the irrigation person will say, well, they didn't come and spray. And, it's just, and the landscaper will say, well, it's not our fault that the heads are messed up. And the irrigation guy will say, well, the landscapers ran over them. So if you have everything in one, they can only blame themselves. So that's the best way to handle that, I always say. I mean, obviously, there's smaller properties where maybe you can't get um, someone that does everything, at a cost that works for your association. But in the long run, I think you do save a lot of headache for yourself, for your board, for the owners, and the amount of money that you get charged for those irrigation heads and repairs constantly, it adds up real quick. And if it's your landscaper and they know they factor in a certain amount of heads every month because they know they're going to hit a few. I mean, it's going to happen. So they're not going to charge you if they're fixing 5 or 6 or 10, depending on the size of the property. It's when you get to like, okay, this person's always parking in their lawn. That's why it's messed up. We can't keep fixing these for free. So I definitely think if you can do it that way, that is the best way to do it. Michael, if the contract does not list what they will charge for extra services, what recourse do we have?
Um, I would ask them to rewrite the agreement so that it gives you more clarification on what is included and what's not included. And for what's not included, what's the rate per hour they charge for hourly rates? Is there a flat fee for installing annuals or for storm damage cleanup, those types of things? All of that should be in there. And if it's not, it's time to rewrite it.
100%. And there, a lot of contracts you'll see if there's extra charges that aren't included, they usually come in an addendum at the end of the contract where they say, like George said, what the hourly rate is, what the flat rate is, so that you can be prepared if you call and ask your landscaper for something, you refer to that to know what the contracted price that you have with them is for those services. Okay, if no one else has any more questions, I am going to put in the chat George's website along with his email address. If you have any questions, 100% reach out to George. So George, thank you so much. I will go over the continuing education with everyone. You're welcome to stay if you want to, but if you don't, have a great day.